The blizzard screamed against the lodge windows like something alive and furious. Snow fell so thick that the world beyond the glass became nothing but white chaos, the kind of cold that didn't just cut through skin but seemed to reach straight into the bone and settle there, heavy and permanent. Rafael Vitoli stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his mountain lodge, one hand wrapped around a glass of bourbon that had gone warm, the other resting on the grip of his Glock 19. Behind him, the fireplace crackled and hissed, flames climbing the chimney, but even that heat couldn't touch the ice that lived in his chest. 3 weeks. 21 days of watching the same woman slip out the side door at midnight like a ghost moving through his house. Mia Santos. The waitress with the hollow eyes and the calloused hands and the orthopedic shoes that made no sound on the hardwood floors. She had stumbled through those doors bleeding and broken on an October night when the wind was trying to kill everything that moved, and he had made a choice that every instinct screamed was a mistake. He watched her now through the frosted glass, her breath visible in small clouds, a thin envelope clutched in her right hand. Her jacket was threadbare, patched at the elbows, the kind of coat that had been washed so many times the fabric was starting to come apart. She moved toward the black SUV waiting at the bottom of the drive, her steps quick and careful, like she was walking on ice that might break beneath her weight at any moment. Marco stood beside Rafael, his massive frame solid as granite, his face carved with the kind of stillness that came from years of watching men die. He had been Rafael's second for 15 years, had seen things that would make lesser men weep, had buried people without asking questions. Now he watched the woman disappear into the vehicle with the same expression a hunter might wear while tracking prey. "She's running," Marco said. His voice was like gravel, rough and final. Again. Every night at the same time, Gino added from his post by the door. He was younger than Marco, maybe 35, with a scar running from his left temple to his jaw like someone had traced a map of violence across his face. For 3 weeks straight. Same envelope. Same SUV waiting 3 blocks away. Rafael said nothing. The bourbon had a taste like smoke and regret. His mind was moving through calculations the way it always did when betrayal was on the table, running through scenarios, measuring costs. In his world, there was only one price for what this looked like. Only one way this story could possibly end. He thought of his brother. Thought of the night 17 years ago when Salvatore walked into a federal building and handed over the entire Chicago operation to the Justice Department. Thought of the money, the names, the safe houses, the suppliers, all of it spilled out like a confession written in blood. Thought of the choice that came after, the one that kept him awake on nights when the city was quiet and his empire was secure and there was nothing left to win. Mercy had a price too. Rafael had learned that lesson in his living room with a gun in his hand and his own brother kneeling in front of him and a choice that could never be unmade. He had chosen survival. Loyalty. The family before everything. Even before blood. So he would not make that mistake again. The SUV pulled away from the lodge, its taillights disappearing into the white wall of the blizzard like something being swallowed. Rafael watched until there was nothing left but snow and darkness and the echo of an engine that was already gone. "Find out where she's going," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath, the kind of voice that made men move without needing to ask why. "Find out who she's meeting. And find out what's in those envelopes. You want us to. I want to know if this woman is a threat. I want to know if she walked into my house knowing exactly who I was, or if she's feeding information to someone who does. Check her phone. Follow her. I want every name, every location, every word she speaks." He turned away from the window. "And Marco? If you find out that she's working with Webb, I want to know before the sun comes up tomorrow." The name hung in the air like poison. Marcus Webb. The man Rafael had been searching for across 2 states and 18 months. The man who had stolen Noah from him. Marco nodded once and moved toward the door. Gino was already on his phone, already making calls, already setting the machinery of Rafael's empire into motion. This was how it worked. This was the language they all spoke. But what Rafael did not understand in that moment was that those midnight trips were not betrayal. Those envelopes contained not money flowing to enemies, but money flowing away from her, Every dollar she had earned in double shifts at a diner on the south side, money she had counted and recounted until her hand shook, money that would never be enough because the debt was designed to never be enough. What Rafael did not understand was that somewhere in a basement on Ashland Avenue, Marcus Webb had a list. A handwritten accounting of every penny Mia Santos owed him, the numbers growing each week because that was how he had been taught to do business. $40 here, $50 there, every small amount creating a mathematical certainty that the debt would never end, that she would spend every remaining day of her life paying for a mistake she had made 2 years ago when she was desperate and broken and someone offered her money for information she didn't even understand she was giving. What Rafael did not understand was that his son had been at the shelter where Mia worked. His son, Noah, 6 years old with intelligent eyes and a story that didn't quite add up, protected by a waitress in orthopedic shoes who loved him more fiercely than she loved her own survival. And that Marcus Webb had found out about this connection. That Webb had seen in Noah a leverage point, a way to make Mia do what he wanted, a way to get closer to Rafael Vitoli and the fortune he was sitting on. What Rafael did not understand was that Mia Santos had made a choice 17 days ago, sitting in a parking lot under a broken streetlight, counting $80, knowing that Webb had given her 5 days to come up with the rest, knowing that he had promised to hurt Noah if she didn't comply, knowing that she had no choice but to meet him and hand him money in envelopes and pray that it would be enough. The lodge was silent except for the roar of the blizzard outside. Rafael walked back to the window and pressed his palm against the cold glass. Snow fell like ash from a burning world. Somewhere in that storm, Mia Santos was driving toward another conversation with a man who had learned to weaponize desperation, and Rafael Vitoli was preparing to do to her exactly what he had done to his own brother. Before we continue, drop a like if this story is hitting you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. The ending of this story will shatter everything you think you know about loyalty and betrayal and the invisible people walking through our lives carrying the weight of other people's cruelty. Now, let us go back to the beginning. Let us return to an October night when the wind was howling and a woman was being beaten in an alley, and a man was making a choice that would change everything. Not because he wanted to save her, but because saving her would eventually lead him to his son, and his son was the only person in the world worth any price at all. Let us go back to the night Rafael Vitoli found Mia Santos bleeding in the dark. The October wind cuts through the south side like a blade wrapped in ice. Dead leaves skitter across cracked pavement, tumbling past broken streetlights that cast sickly yellow halos onto empty sidewalks. Rosario's diner sits dark except for the kitchen lights bleeding through the back windows, and inside, at the counter, a woman counts money with hands that will not stop shaking. Mia Santos has been standing on her feet for 16 hours. Double shift. Breakfast rush into dinner rush into the graveyard crew that nobody wants because the tips are thin and the customers are meaner when the sun goes down. Her apron is stained with coffee and something that might be blood from when she cut her hand on a broken glass at 11:33 p.m., and she did not notice for 20 minutes because she was too tired to feel pain. The orthopedic shoes on her feet are worn through at the heels. The left one has a hole she has been covering with duct tape for 3 weeks. She has counted the same $78 6 times now, arranging the bills in a neat line on the Formica counter, hoping that somehow the number will change. It does not change. The clock on the diner wall reads 3:22 in the morning. The only sounds are the hum of the dying neon sign in the window and the scrape of her fingernail against a $5 bill as she pulls a piece of paper from her apron pocket. The paper is folded so many times the creases have become soft and dark as scars. She unfolds it with the careful reverence of someone handling something that might break. The list. Every debt written in her own handwriting, every amount accumulated like a curse that could not be erased. $85,000. The number sits at the bottom in darker ink, circled 3 times. Beneath it, in Marcus Webb's handwriting, left in a note slipped under her shelter cot 2 weeks ago, 5 days from October 23rd. That gives her until October 28th. It is now October 24th at 3:22 in the morning. She has 4 days and 20 hours and 38 minutes. The debt has been growing for 8 months. It started at $42,000. Then $50. Then $70. Every time she paid him an installment, he added interest. Compounding interest, he called it. The cost of her disobedience. The price of her refusal to do what he asked. What he had asked was simple. Help him find the boy's family. The boy at the shelter. Noah. She had said no. Marcus Webb had then explained, in a voice like venom poured into ice water, that her refusal had come with a price. $85,000. Payable in small installments. Non-negotiable. And if she did not comply, if she did not help him find whoever was keeping Noah hidden from the world, he would hurt the boy in ways she could not imagine. So she had counted her $78, and she had folded her list of debts, and she had practiced saying the words she would need to say the next time Marcus Webb cornered her. She had practiced her apology. Her surrender. She had practiced dying inside while staying alive on the outside. Outside, the October wind howled. The back door of Rosario's diner opens with a screech of hinges that have not been oiled in years. Mia looks up, expecting to see Tony the night cook stepping out for a cigarette. Instead, she sees Marcus Webb walking toward her, and her breath catches in her throat like something drowning. He is 6'2", built like someone who once played college football before he discovered that rage was more profitable than athletics. His face is handsome in the way that dangerous things often are, sharp cheekbones, eyes that are too bright, a mouth that smiles without warmth. He wears a leather jacket that costs more than her monthly rent, and his hands are shoved into pockets that probably contain money and weapons in equal measure. "We need to talk," he says. His voice is smooth, almost reasonable, which is worse than if he were shouting. "In private." Mia's mouth is dry. "I have money. $40. I can?" "Not here." He gestures toward the back alley. "Now." She does not move. Every nerve ending in her body is screaming at her to run, to lock the door, to scream for Tony, but she knows from 8 months of incremental debt and incremental threats that running only makes it worse. So she sets down her $78, and she follows him out the back door into the October night. The alley is narrow, cramped between 2 brick buildings, lit only by a security light that flickers like a dying heartbeat. Dumpsters loom on either side. The smell is old grease and rotting food and something else, something like despair. Marcus Webb stops walking and turns to face her. His expression has changed. The smoothness is gone. What remains is pure contempt. "You think you can tell me no?" His voice is different now. Harder. Sharper. Each word lands like a punch. "You think there are no consequences for refusing me?" "Marcus, please. I'll help you. I'm sorry. I was scared, but I'm not scared anymore. I'll find out who." His fist moves faster than thought. It connects with her jaw and the world explodes into white light and pain. Her teeth cut the inside of her cheek. She tastes copper, bright and metallic, and she understands with perfect clarity that this is happening. This is real. This is about to get much worse. She tries to step back. He steps forward. His hand grabs her throat, and suddenly breathing becomes negotiable. His fingers are wrapped around her windpipe like a noose, and she is pulling at his wrist, gasping, her vision tunneling down to a pinpoint. She can see the rage in his eyes, the absolute certainty of his power, and she understands that he has been waiting for an excuse to do this for months. His other fist comes up. It slams into her ribs. Once. Twice. 3 times. She hears something crack inside her chest, a sound like splintering wood, and the pain is so complete it stops being pain and becomes simply the shape of her entire existence. He throws her backward against the brick wall. Her skull connects with something hard, and everything goes soft and strange. There is blood running down her temple, mixing with tears she did not know she was crying. She is on the ground now, her breath coming in whistles through a throat that has been crushed. Her ribs are screaming. One eye has already swollen shut from the first punch. Marcus Webb stands over her, breathing hard. He spits. The saliva lands near her face, close enough that she can see it glisten in the flickering security light. "You have until tomorrow night," he says. His voice is steady, almost conversational, which is somehow the most terrifying thing of all. 8 hours from sunset. I want the boy's family. Names. Addresses. Everything. Or I go to that shelter and I take him out to the parking lot. And I hurt him in ways he will never recover from. Understand? Mia cannot speak. Her throat will not work. She nods, a tiny movement, barely perceptible. "I did not hear you." "Yes," she rasps. The word tears something inside her. "Yes, what?" "Yes, I understand." Marcus Webb walks away. His footsteps fade toward the front of the diner. She hears his car start, the engine roaring to life, the sound of tires accelerating on wet pavement. Then there is only the wind and the sound of her own breathing, shallow and broken, and the soft drip of blood hitting concrete. She does not know how long she lies there. Time has become elastic and meaningless. Eventually, she manages to push herself up onto her elbows. Every movement sends fresh lightning through her ribs. She is fairly certain that at least one is broken. She has never broken a bone before, so she is not entirely sure, but the pain is the kind that feels like something has changed permanently inside her body. The October wind pushes at her as she stumbles away from the alley. Her vision is compromised, one eye closed completely, the other seeing the world through a haze of pain. Blood runs down her temple, and she does not bother to wipe it away. She walks because staying still is not an option. She cannot go back to the shelter. Marcus knows where she lives. He knows the address of every bed she has slept in for the past 2 years. He will be waiting at the shelter. He will know she refused him. He will go find Noah. The temperature is dropping. The October wind is becoming something with teeth. Snow is starting to fall, just a few flakes at first, then more, accumulating on her thin coat and in her hair. She walks for hours. Miles. Her ribs scream with every breath. Her throat swells until swallowing becomes agony. She counts her steps like some people count prayers, needing the rhythm to stay conscious, needing the forward motion to mean something. And then, as she is walking down a tree-lined street, she sees lights glowing through the darkness. A house. No, not a house. A lodge. It is large and beautiful, built of stone and wood, with windows that glow like lanterns and a driveway that curves away toward the trees. It looks warm. It looks safe. It looks like somewhere a person could stop walking and simply rest. She has no plan when she staggers toward the door. She has no strategy, no careful explanation, no story prepared. She only knows that she cannot walk any further, that her body has reached its limit, that she will collapse here in the snow if no one lets her inside. Her knuckles connect with the heavy wooden door. The sound is small and pathetic, barely audible over the roar of the blizzard. She waits. Nothing happens. She knocks again, harder this time, and her ribs send white-hot pain through her entire body. She is about to turn away, about to walk back into the darkness, when the door swings open. The man who stands in the doorway is tall. So tall that she has to tilt her head back to see his face, and the movement sends nausea spinning through her skull. He is dressed entirely in black, black sweater, black trousers, black watch that catches the light like a predator's eye. His hair is dark, pushed back from a face that is all sharp angles and careful control. But it is his eyes that stop her breath. They are dark gray, the color of storm clouds, and they are looking at her with an intensity that feels like being seen under a surgical light. For 3 seconds, neither of them moves. Then the man's expression shifts. His gaze travels across her swollen face, her blood-stained clothes, her shaking body, and she watches something crystallize in his features. Something cold. Something dangerous. Something that recognizes violence the way only another form of violence can. "Marco," he calls. His voice is deep and solid like an oath. "Gino. Get her inside." 2 men appear from somewhere inside the lodge. They are large, built like the kinds of men who work in professions where size and silence are profitable. They do not ask questions. They simply reach for her with surprising gentleness, supporting her weight as her knees buckle, carrying her inside where it is warm and bright and safe. The man who opened the door watches her being carried past him, and something flickers across his face. Recognition, perhaps. Or the beginning of understanding that the universe has just placed inside his home the answer to a question that has been burning inside him for 6 months. His name is Rafael Vitoli. He is the most powerful crime boss in Chicago. And he has been searching for Noah for longer than he can bear to admit. The fireplace roared like a living thing, flames leaping and twisting against the stone hearth, casting shadows that danced across Mia Santos's face as consciousness pulled her back into her broken body. She lay on a leather couch that cost more than everything she owned, its surface cold beneath her swollen cheek, and for a moment she could not remember how she had arrived in this place. Then the pain arrived. Sharp, precise, a reminder written in bruises across her throat and ribs and the soft tissue of her eye that had swollen shut an hour before the blizzard drove her toward the light of this lodge. Outside, snow piled against windows with the sound of falling silence. Wind howled through the eaves like something caged and desperate to escape. She tried to sit up. Her body refused. Every muscle screamed an argument, so she lay still and took inventory of what remained. 10 fingers, though 3 of them bent at angles that made her stomach turn. Both eyes, though one saw only darkness and shadows. Her ribs, which were not broken, which was its own small mercy. Her mind, sharp and terrified and calculating how far the blizzard had carried her from the south side, from the shelter, from Noah. A man sat across from her in the shadows, in a chair positioned where the firelight could not quite reach his face. She could see only the shape of him, the broad shoulders, the stillness that came from someone accustomed to silence and waiting. He had not moved in what felt like hours. "How long have I been here?" Her voice emerged broken, fractured like glass after impact. 3 hours. The man's voice was deep and solid like an oath. "You were unconscious for the first 2. Marco brought you inside at 11:47. You collapsed in the snow perhaps a quarter mile from the road." She tried to piece together how that had happened. Marcus's fists in the alley behind Rosario's diner. His breath reeking of cheap whiskey. His voice low and vicious, "You are going to help me, Mia. You are going to introduce me to that boy at the shelter. That quiet kid with the expensive jacket he hides under donated coats. And when I have what I need from him, you will get paid. $5,000. Then all the rest of what you owe me starts over fresh." She had run. "Who did this to you?" or the man asked. His voice did not rise, but something in it changed. Something cold began to move beneath the surface, like a blade wrapped in ice sliding through deep water. Mia turned her head toward the voice, though the movement sent nausea spinning through her skull like a carnival ride. The man leaned forward. The firelight caught his face, and she saw him fully for the first time. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with the kind of face that women probably found beautiful before they learned what he was. Dark hair, pushed back from features that were all sharp angles and careful control. Cheekbones that could cut. A mouth that did not move unless it had something lethal to say. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. They were dark gray, the color of storm clouds just before thunder breaks the sky, and they were looking at her with an intensity that felt like being examined under a surgical light. "My ex," she whispered. "Marcus Webb. It is nothing. Nothing does not leave handprints like these." He gestured toward her throat, where bruises were already beginning their transformation from red to purple. "Nothing does not swell a woman's eye shut." "Who is Marcus Webb?" She did not answer. He waited. The silence stretched between them like a physical thing, heavy and patient, and she understood in that moment that this man was not accustomed to being ignored. His hands rested on the arms of his chair, one of them wearing a gold watch that probably cost more than a year of her old rent. She could see the scar that ran along his left temple, thin and white and ancient, and something in her recognized violence the way only violence can recognize itself. "He says I owe him money," she finally said. $85,000. He wants it in 5 days or he will hurt someone I care about. Who? His jaw tightened. I cannot tell you. Cannot or will not? Both. She turned her face away. And I am sorry for trespassing on your property. The road was closed. The snow came so fast. I did not think. I just ran. She heard him move, a shift in the chair, a leather creak that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet lodge. Your name? Mia. Just Mia. Mia Santos. He nodded once, slowly, as if her name meant something to him, as if he was filing it away into a place where important information was stored. Then he called out toward the hallway, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Marco. Gino. She needs medical attention. Call Dr. Reeves. Tell him it is urgent. And prepare the guest house. She is staying until she heals. Footsteps approached from somewhere deeper in the lodge, quick and efficient, and 2 men appeared in the doorway. They were large, built like the kinds of men who work in professions where size and silence are profitable. Neither of them asked questions. They simply approached her with a gentleness that seemed impossible in bodies that large, supporting her weight as her knees buckled, carrying her toward a bedroom down a hallway lined with paintings worth more than 100 years of her wages. As they moved her past him, the man in the chair watched. Something flickered across his face, quick as lightning. Recognition, perhaps. Or the beginning of understanding that the universe had just placed inside his home the answer to a question that had been burning inside him for 6 months. His name was Rafael Vitoli. He was the most powerful crime boss in Chicago. And he had been searching for Noah for longer than he could bear to admit. The next morning arrived through windows tall enough to stand in, bringing light that hurt Mia's single open eye. She woke on a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud made of expensive thread count, and for a moment she forgot where she was. Then she remembered everything. The blizzard. The lodge. The man with the scar and the storm cloud eyes. And the photograph she had not seen yet, sitting on a desk somewhere in this house, waiting to change everything. Dr. Reeves had come at midnight and gone by 2 in the morning, leaving behind instructions and pain medication and the verdict that 3 of her ribs were cracked, not broken, which was its own small mercy. She had drifted in and out of sleep listening to the wind continue its assault against the windows, and when she woke again, sunlight was flooding the room with a clarity that made her want to close her eyes and hide. She tried to stand. Her body cooperated, barely, moving through pain like pushing through water. Someone had cleaned the blood from her clothes while she slept, and left fresh garments folded on a chair, expensive clothes that fit her, which meant someone had guessed her size, which meant someone had been paying attention. A knock came at the door. Not aggressive, just a courtesy warning. Come in, she said. Marco entered, the taller of the 2 men from the night before, his face expressionless. The boss says you can stay as long as you need. The blizzard has closed all the roads. Forecasters say the highways will not be clear until tomorrow at the earliest. I should leave. You can barely walk. He stated this as fact, not cruelty. Breakfast is in the kitchen. The boss wants to see you when you are ready. But there is no rush. He'll first. He paused at the door. For what it is worth, nobody has ever been brought to this house before. Not like this. The boss does not let people see him. But he saw you. After he left, Mia sat on the edge of the bed and took inventory of her new reality. She had $273 in a bank account that she shared with no one. She had a job that paid minimum wage plus tips, which averaged $14 a shift. She had a 6-year-old boy at a South Side shelter who depended on her to keep him safe, and a debt that grew like a tumor with each passing day. And now she had a temporary shelter in a house that probably had more square footage than the entire shelter building. When she could stand without trembling, she made her way downstairs. The lodge was enormous, all exposed beams and stone and windows that framed the mountain like it was a painting someone had hung just for this room. Rafael sat at a long dining table with Marco and Gino, eating breakfast that smelled like coffee and butter and expensive eggs. He looked up when she entered, and his eyes tracked her progress across the room with the focus of a predator. "You should be resting," he said. I needed to move. She pulled out a chair and sat carefully, every muscle protesting. "Your men said the roads are closed. Until tomorrow. You are welcome to stay that long, at least." He took a sip of coffee. "What is your employment situation?" "I work at Rosario's diner on the south side. Night shift. Double shifts when I can get them." She paused. "I will need to call them. They will think I abandoned." "You are injured." "That is not abandonment." He set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "When you are healed, what will you do? Return to the diner?" "To the south side." She thought about Marcus standing outside waiting for her. She thought about the list he kept, the one with numbers that only grew larger. She thought about Noah at the shelter, his intelligent eyes that saw too much for a 6-year-old, his habit of hiding under donated coats because something in his history had taught him that hiding kept you safe. "I do not know," she said honestly. Rafael nodded, as if this answer satisfied something in him. "Stay here until you are healed. We will discuss your future after that." For 3 days she moved through the lodge like a ghost, cleaning things that did not need cleaning, folding things that did not need folding, trying to make herself useful in exchange for shelter and safety. Her ribs ached with each breath. Her face was a palette of bruises, yellows and purples and shades of green that made her look like a watercolor painting of pain. Rafael watched her from corners and doorways, never approaching, never demanding anything, just observing the way a general surveys a battlefield. On the morning of the 4th day, she was cleaning the study, a room lined with books and art that probably cost more than the shelter's annual budget, when she saw the photograph on Rafael's desk. It was just a small frame, nothing special, sitting beside a telephone and a leather journal. But in it, a boy smiled at the camera with intelligent eyes and an almost defiant expression, as if he was challenging the universe to doubt his worth. He wore a jacket that Mia recognized from the shelter, the expensive one he kept hidden under donated coats to keep anyone from asking where it came from. Her hands froze mid-air, the dust cloth falling away. It was Noah. "You know him." The voice came from the doorway, and Mia jumped so violently that pain shot through her ribs. She turned to find Rafael watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "I can see it in your face. You know him." I volunteer at a Southside shelter," she said carefully, choosing each word like she was defusing a bomb. "He was there for a while. Quiet boy. Very smart. Was." Rafael's eyes narrowed. "He is no longer there. He left about 6 months ago." The lie slid out smooth and polished. "I do not know where he went." Something shifted in Rafael's expression. His jaw tightened. His hand moved to his side, and she realized he was wearing a gun beneath his sweater, just as she had suspected. "That boy is my son. He was taken from me 8 years ago. I have been searching for him since." Mia's heart stopped. Every blood cell in her body seemed to freeze simultaneously. She stared at Rafael Vitoli, the most powerful crime boss in Chicago, and understood in that moment that everything had changed. The protection she had been quietly building around Noah for 2 years, the careful walls she had constructed to keep him safe from Marcus Webb and worse predators than Marcus Webb, all of it was now being scrutinized by someone far more dangerous than a desperate ex-boyfriend. I did not know," she whispered. Clearly. His voice was ice. "You will tell me everything you know about where my son is." "I cannot." The words came out before she could stop them. "I promised him." "You promised a child you knew for a few months over the well-being of his father." "I promised him safety." She met his gaze, though every survival instinct she possessed was screaming at her to look away. "And I intend to keep that promise." Rafael's hand moved toward his gun, then stopped. Something flickered in his expression, rage, certainly, but beneath it something else. Respect, perhaps. or recognition that this small woman, broken and bruised and standing in his study with dust still clinging to her hair, had just drawn a line that she was willing to die to defend. You have 1 hour to explain to me exactly what is happening. And Mia Santos, if you lie to me again, I will know. My men are very good at determining truth from fiction. He turned to leave. 1 hour. Kitchen table. Do not make me come looking for you. When he was gone, Mia sat down slowly in his desk chair, her legs no longer capable of supporting her weight. She pulled the photograph toward her and looked at Noah's face, so serious, so young, so completely unaware that his father had never stopped searching for him, and that the woman who had been protecting him had just walked into the house of the man who had been hunting them both. Outside, wind moved through the trees with the sound of warning. The October wind cut through the garden like a blade wrapped in ice, and Mia Santos stood among the dead leaves with frost clinging to her hair, her thin jacket no match for the cold that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The handwritten debt list trembled in her hands, $85,000 in black ink, numbers that kept growing, each one a small death, each one a promise she could never keep. She had $78 left. $78. The exact amount she had carried in her pocket the night Rafael found her bleeding in that alley, and now it was all that stood between her and complete annihilation. Then Marcus Webb emerged from the tree line like a predator who had finally cornered his prey. He was thin in the way of men who spent their money on substances instead of food, his jacket worn at the elbows, his eyes bright with the certainty of someone who believed he held all the power in the world. When he smiled, his teeth looked grey. "Morning, Mia." "Surprised to see me?" She did not answer. She could not answer. Every survival instinct she possessed had gone quiet, waiting, the way prey goes quiet when the hunter is close enough to hear breathing. "Time is up," Marcus said, stepping closer. The frost crackled beneath his shoes. 5 days ago, I gave you a deadline. $85,000 or I go to that shelter and put a bullet in Noah's head. That is what we agreed. I do not have it." Her voice came out as barely a whisper, the words fractured and small. "You know I do not have it. Then you better convince your boyfriend to pay me. Or I make one phone call to the Calabrese family and tell them exactly where Rafael Vitoli sleeps at night." Marcus pulled a cigarette from his pocket, tapped it against his thumbnail. "How much do you think his head is worth? $500,000? $1 million? I am thinking I cash in tonight." The lodge door opened behind her. Rafael stepped out with Marco and Gino flanking him like shadows given flesh, and something in Marcus Webb's face shifted, fear flickered there for just a moment before his grin returned, uglier than before, the grin of a man about to play his final card. "Rafael Vitoli," Marcus said, and his voice had changed, taken on a theatrical quality, the voice of someone addressing an audience. "I have been looking for you. Your little waitress here has been feeding me information for weeks. Check her bank account. Oh wait, she does not have one. Check her pockets. That is what I pay her per meeting. $78 to betray you." Mia's face crumpled. "That is a lie. I have been paying you. Every week, every tip I earned, I paid you." "Prove it," Marcus sneered, and the word landed like a slap because there was no proof, no receipts, no bank statements, nothing but her word against his, and a man like Rafael Vitoli did not build an empire on the word of a waitress from the south side. Rafael's eyes moved to her. She saw it in that moment, the doubt. The terrible, space-opening doubt that cracked the foundation of everything she had built in the last 4 weeks. His expression did not change. A man like Rafael Vitoli did not show emotion in front of his men. But she saw it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his hand moved fractionally closer to the gun at his hip. He believed her. And he did not believe her. Both things existed in him at the same time, and it was that uncertainty that terrified her more than any threat Marcus Webb could make. "You have 10 seconds to leave my property," Rafael said, his voice ice forming on water, forming on stone, forming on bone. "Or what? You are going to kill me in front of witnesses? In front of your betrayer?" Marcus backed away, laughing, and then he was gone, melting back into the trees like poison dispersing through water. That night, Mia stood alone outside the lodge while the October cold devoured the world. Dead leaves skittered across frozen ground like small bones. Her breath came in visible gasps, and in her shaking hand she held the debt list, $85000, growing every week, numbers that blurred as her tears froze on her cheeks before they could fall. She had nothing. No money. No home. No trust. No future. Marcus would hurt Noah. Rafael thought she was a traitor. Sophie Langford had destroyed her reputation with manufactured evidence, photographs of her meeting Marcus, bank transfers fabricated, all of it spread across social media by Sophie's connections, her wealth weaponized against someone too poor to fight back. The shelter had quietly asked her to stop volunteering. The diner had reduced her hours. She was becoming invisible again, but this time not the quiet invisible of someone no one noticed. This time the visible invisible of someone everyone despised. She looked down at the ravine beyond the property line. The darkness down there seemed to breathe. It would be easy. So easy to just disappear. She was invisible anyway. Always had been. A waitress in orthopedic shoes, a woman who counted $78 like it was the crown jewels, who ate leftovers from garbage cans and slept on shelter's hard cots and loved a child that was not hers and protected a man who did not trust her. Nobody would miss her. The world would barely register her absence. The shelter would find another volunteer. The diner would find another waitress. Rafael would find another woman to suspect of betrayal, and she would be erased the way she had always been meant to be erased. Her feet moved toward the edge. One step. Then another. And then the lodge door opened behind her, and Rafael's voice cut through the darkness like a blade through silk. Mia! Come inside. It is freezing. She closed her eyes. One more day, she thought. One more day of breathing, of pretending, of surviving. She could do that. She had done it for 32 years. What was one more day? She turned back toward the light. Inside the lodge, Rafael sat across from her at the kitchen table, and his expression had changed in the way that men's expressions change when they have made a decision that will alter everything. Tell me everything, he said. The truth. All of it. She did. The entire story poured out like blood from a wound that had been stitched shut but never healed. How she found Noah at the shelter 2 years ago, a boy with intelligent eyes and a story that did not quite add up, how she recognized something broken in him that matched the broken things inside her. How Marcus discovered the connection, realized who the boy's father was, how he cornered her with threats and fire and the weight of a child's life balanced on her shoulders. How she refused to help him extort Rafael, and how he responded by claiming she owed him $85,000 for a business opportunity she had ruined by leaving him years ago. How she had been paying him $50 here, $78 there, every tip she earned, knowing it would never be enough, just buying time, just trying to keep Noah alive. I was not betraying you, she whispered, and her voice broke like thin ice under weight. I was protecting your son. The only way I knew how. Rafael stared at her for a long moment. His hand moved to his phone. Marco. I need 12 men. Now. And get me coordinates on Marcus Webb's current location. He paused. Yes. Tonight. End this. Midnight came like a blade. Marcus Webb sat in a South Side warehouse counting cash, grinning like a man who had just won the lottery, selling intelligence to Calabrese family representatives about Rafael Vitoli's location, his movements, his patterns. The money was stacked on the table in front of him, $40,000, the first installment of his betrayal payment. He was already imagining what he would do with it, already planning his disappearance, already practicing his lies. Then the lights went out. 12 men in black moved through the darkness like ghosts, like shadows given purpose, and the only sound was the soft percussion of their footsteps on concrete. Marcus spun, panicked, his hands moving toward the gun at his waist, but he was too slow, too small, too mortal to matter. Rafael stepped from the darkness. You made a mistake, Marcus, he said, and his voice was death itself, was the voice of consequence made flesh. You touched what was mine. You threatened my son. You tried to sell me to men who would have butchered everyone I love. And worst of all, you made her believe that the world was still the kind of place where monsters like you could win. Marcus backed up, his face draining of color, his mouth opening and closing like a fish dying in air. She owed me money. She owed you nothing. Marco. Take him to the Calabrese family. Let them know he has been selling them false information. Let them handle their disappointment. Marcus collapsed to his knees, and his voice became something inhuman, high and broken and pleading, the sound of a man shattering from the inside out. Please, please, I will disappear. You will never see me again. You are right about that, Rafael said quietly, and turned away while Marco and Gino dragged Marcus Webb screaming into the October night, dragged him toward a fate so terrible that death would have seemed merciful, toward the kind of ending that men like Marcus Webb deserved. He was never seen again. The next morning, the sun rose over Chicago like a promise being kept. Sophie Langford was arrested on the steps of her mansion at dawn, and the federal agents who came for her did not apologize or soften the humiliation. They cuffed her wrists while news cameras flashed, while neighbors watched from their windows, while the entire foundation of her carefully constructed life crumbled like ash in rain. Rafael had made a single phone call to contacts in federal law enforcement, had provided evidence of embezzlement, fabricated charitable documents, bribes paid to officials. 40 years in federal prison. Her wealth seized. Her name destroyed. The social circles that had protected her for decades abandoned her in the time it took for the news to spread, and Sophie Langford learned what it meant to be invisible, the way Mia had been invisible, the way the powerless are always invisible. Rafael watched the news with Mia beside him, her hand resting in his, and he said something quiet and final. Too quick would have been a bullet. Too easy would have been death. Too merciful would have been erasure. This is better. She lived with the fall. She lived with knowing that everything she was proud of meant nothing. That afternoon, Rafael brought Mia to the south side shelter where Noah was playing with wooden blocks, stacking them into towers that reached toward imaginary sky. When he saw Rafael, his face transformed into pure light. Papa! Papa, you came! He ran into Rafael's arms, and Rafael held him the way a man holds something infinitely precious, something he would kill to protect, something that had been taken from him for so long that its return felt like resurrection. Then Noah saw Mia and wrapped his small arms around her legs, and his 6-year-old voice carried a wisdom that seemed to come from somewhere beyond childhood. You found each other, he said simply, as if it was obvious, as if the world had simply righted itself into the shape it was always meant to occupy. Rafael looked at Mia over the boy's head, and something shifted in his eyes, something that had been closed and locked and defended finally opening, like a door that had been sealed for years suddenly swinging wide. In that moment, she was no longer invisible. She was no longer a waitress counting $78. She was no longer a woman protecting someone else's child. She was chosen. 3 months after that October night when everything shattered and reformed, Mia Santos stood in a cottage at the edge of Rafael Vitoli's property, folding clean linens in a bedroom that was hers to keep. The cottage smelled like fresh paint and possibility, a far cry from the shelter cot with its thin mattress and the sound of 50 other lives pressing against her through paper-thin walls. She ran her fingers across the white cotton, feeling the weight of it, the realness of ownership. Her own roof. Her own kitchen. Her own door that locked from the inside. Rafael had offered her the master suite in the lodge. She had refused. The cottage meant something different. It meant she had not been claimed like property. It meant she could choose to stay without suffocating under the weight of gratitude. He respected this without argument. Marco noticed. In 15 years, Marco had never seen Rafael accept a boundary without negotiation, without the subtle pressure that came from being accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. But with Mia, something shifted. Rafael simply nodded and arranged for the cottage to be prepared. She paid rent. Not much. Rafael would have paid everything, would have given her the mountain itself if she asked, but Mia insisted on $800 a month from her salary as estate manager. She managed the household staff, coordinated meals, oversaw maintenance, kept the books. Real work. Real payment. Real independence, with threads still tying her to him, to this life, to the man who had chosen to believe her when the world would have condemned her. The first time she saw Rafael each morning was at 6 o'clock. He would appear at the cottage kitchen with 2 cups of coffee, black, still steaming. He never knocked. She had given him a key. They would sit in silence while the Chicago dawn broke gray and cold over the property, and neither of them spoke because the coffee was enough, the presence was enough, the shared quiet was more than either of them had dared to hope for. Then he would leave, returning to the lodge, and Mia would wake Noah for school. By month 6, everything had shifted again. Mia had enrolled in night classes at a community college downtown. Accounting. She had filled out the application with hands that trembled because education felt impossible, like asking for the sky. The tuition notice arrived, $2,400 per semester. She stared at the number for an entire hour, doing the mathematics in her head. If she saved $50 a week, if she never ate anything but rice and beans, if she worked double shifts on weekends for 2 years. 2 years. The deadline was 3 weeks away. She found the tuition paid when she called to confirm enrollment. Not paid. Covered. Completed. Rafael's name on the receipt. Mia drove to the lodge in the November darkness, and her hands gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. She climbed the stone steps, and Marco moved aside without question. She found Rafael in his office surrounded by papers and the weight of an empire that never slept. He looked up when she entered, and something in his face shifted toward her, always toward her, like the natural pull of gravity. "You paid my tuition," she said. Not a question. Yes. I did not ask for charity. Rafael set down his pen with deliberate care. He stood and walked toward her slowly, the way one approaches something wild that might bolt. It is not charity, Mia. It is investment. Investment in what? Your future. Your independence. Your strength. He stopped a foot away from her, careful, always careful. You will pay me back. How? The word broke open like a question she had been afraid to ask since the moment she met him. By staying. The words hung in the cold air between them like something that could shatter. Mia felt her breath catch in her throat. Staying. Not running. Not disappearing into the shadows the way she had learned to do. Not treating this as temporary, as borrowed time before everything fell apart again. You ask too much, she whispered. I ask exactly what I have already given, Rafael replied. Stay, Mia. Stay for yourself. Stay for Noah. Stay because you choose to, not because you owe me. Stay because this is where you belong. She nodded once and turned away before he could see her tears. The seasons turned. By month 9, small gestures had become the language they spoke fluently. Rafael brought coffee at 6 in the morning, but now he stayed 20 minutes instead of 5, sitting across from her at the kitchen table while Noah slept upstairs. Mia left books on his desk. A novel about a woman building a business empire. A memoir about survival. A collection of poetry that made her think of him, the careful words, the controlled power, the things unsaid beneath every sentence. In return, Rafael assigned Marco to follow her everywhere. Not as punishment. Not as control. But as protection, he explained when she confronted him about it, standing in his office with her hands clenched into fists. I cannot lose you, he had said simply. Not after I just found you. Not when you are the only thing that makes any sense. She had not argued. Marco's presence meant she was safe. It also meant Rafael thought of her constantly, that his mind returned to her danger over and over throughout the day. Protection was its own kind of love in this world. By 1 year, Mia had become something she never expected to be indispensable. She had earned her associate degree in accounting. She managed Rafael's legitimate businesses, and there were more legitimate ones now, quietly growing while the criminal empire contracted slightly, shifted, transformed. She had a salary of $55,000 a year, savings of $12,000 in an account with her name on it, a credit history that was building, a future that no longer looked impossible. Noah called her Tia Mia, though she suspected he did not fully understand the word. He simply knew she was present. She was constant. She was the soft place he fell when Rafael's edges were too sharp. One October night, exactly 1 year after the blizzard, after the broken body crawling through snow, Mia sat on the cottage porch. The dry wind rattled the leaves with a sound like whispered warnings. She wore a sweater Rafael had given her, cashmere, the color of cream. Above her, stars scattered across the Chicago sky like scattered promises. Rafael found her there. He always found her. "I owe you an apology," he said, standing at the porch rail. "For what?" She did not turn to look at him, but her body tensed with the awareness of his presence. "For suspecting you. For watching you leave at midnight with my hand on my gun, convinced you were meeting Marcus Webb to betray me. For doubting you when you were protecting my son at the cost of everything you had." Mia was quiet. "Then, you were protecting him too. In the only way you knew how. We both were. We both made choices that looked like betrayal from the outside but were actually love from the inside." Rafael stepped closer. "Mia, I have been protecting you for a year. Keeping distance. Waiting. For what? For you to be ready. To be whole. To stand as my equal and not as someone I saved." He reached out and cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing the small scar where bruises once lived. "You do now." She kissed him. Outside, the October wind rattled leaves like the sound of time moving forward, like the world writing itself into the shape it was always meant to occupy. 2 years after that October night, Mia and Rafael stood in the mountain lodge during another blizzard. The fire crackled with warmth, and snow pressed against windows like hands trying to get inside. Noah, now 8 years old, slept upstairs in a room filled with toys and safety and the certainty that he would wake to breakfast made by hands that loved him. Mia wore a ring. Not a proposal ring, they had simply decided one evening that they were already married in everything but paperwork, so why wait? The ring was simple gold, cost less than Rafael's daily coffee budget, but she had chosen it herself, had paid for it herself using her own money, and that made it worth everything. Rafael held her close, his chin resting on her head. "Do you remember that night?" he asked. "When you stumbled through that door, broken and bleeding, looking for shelter from the cold? I remember thinking I had nothing left to lose. You had everything to lose. You just did not see it yet. You carried Noah's safety. You carried your own strength. You carried the capacity to change me, to change us, to change everything." She smiled against his chest. "Neither of us could see it then." "I see it now," Rafael said. He kissed her temple where a small scar remained, the permanent map of a journey that had brought her here, to this fire, to this man, to this life that had seemed impossible from the shelter cot where she had counted $78 and called it survival. Mia Santos had been a waitress with bruises on her throat and a debt that would never die. But she had protected a child who was not hers, and in protecting him, she had protected herself. She had stood between danger and innocence with nothing but courage, and that had been enough. More than enough. It had been everything. Sometimes the people who seem invisible carry the greatest light. If this story moved you, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to remember that being invisible does not mean being powerless. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Tomorrow we bring you another story that will change how you see loyalty, love, and second chances. Comment below, have you ever been invisible to the world but essential to one person? Tell us your story. Remember this always, sometimes the people who seem invisible carry the greatest light. No matter how hard life gets, after the rain, the sky clears. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We wish you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.